In the last episode of this playlist, I was talking about the circumstances by which I acquired a copy of the book about Machu Picchu in Inca history. And it was on my last full day in Cusco. The following day was quite a bit of a hike. It was very much an adventure trying to get to the Cusco airport in order to complete my travel in Peru with the last few days in Lima. But in order to get there, I had to cross several blocks of the historic area, which unfortunately were closed off for some reason that I had not foreseen. I didn't understand why these blocks were closed off, but somehow there was no transportation, no taxis could get into the center of this historic area. So from the hotel, I had to dash with one hand carrying my heavy bag that was already filled with a week and a half of souvenirs, and on my shoulder I was carrying my bag that was containing my laptop and several other essentials. So I had to sprint across several blocks in order to finally reach the area that had been cleared out and was open to traffic. That's where I got a taxi that took me to the airport. I finally arrived there and I saw this fantastic golden mask again of the visage of the sun god Inti. And as I was going up to the level of the terminal, I had a rocoto empanada, a turnover that was filled with meat and chili pepper and olives and raisins. And it sounds a lot better, and it tastes a lot better than it sounds. It was really delicious. It was a very hearty breakfast now that I finally had one. And nearby, there was a gift shop that had an extensive book collection. It was mostly a bookstore with souvenirs. And it was there that I found the last book purchases that I would make from the 2 weeks I spent in Peru. And they happened to be a pair of comic books that I found at the airport, and they belong to the Sacred Warrior series. I got the issues 2 and 3 of a 13-part series that was made by the Ediciones Umeres. And this was just an extraordinary find. I just regret that I couldn't find more issues beyond the 2 that I found here, because I really, even though I really enjoyed these 2, I just wanted more. And as soon as I can find an outlet or a way to order these from Peru, I will share a link in the description below, because I really want to get the whole set. I was just so impressed with the content and the presentation of these 2. So what are these stories about? They are as I said, a 13-part series that are basically a dramatized retelling of one of the most important myths of the Inca, from the Inca, and that was the Huarochirí Manuscript, which is very well known. And if I can find a good link to a playlist, which I've seen before, I will include a link that has commentary on the content and nature of the Huarochirí manuscript, which was written in the late 16th century. And this is the backdrop for much of the plot that drives this 13-part story. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to pick up the other issues, but what I have gathered from issues 2 and 3 is that what it's doing is it is treating the gods and goddesses, some of the major players of the Inca pantheon, into characters that have that are engaging in the history of the indigenous Peruvian civilizations. And so this is going in a roughly chronological sequence. It's beginning with the creation of the universe by the major Inca gods, and then some of the conflicts that began to ensue after some of them began to resist or rebel against the sacred order. That is the premise of Uku Pacha, or literally the below world. And from my first video for the series, I talk about the ideas of Kai, Hanan, and Uku Pacha, the here, the above, and the lower realms or realities. And so I will provide a link up above, so if you want to take a look at that, you can hear me talk more about this concept of space-time in Inca and Quechua culture. But I wanted to show some examples of the illustrations, the quality of the work, and the content that these books provide. You can see that it picks up from the conclusion of issue 1 with a fight between the sun god Inti and some of the enemy forces. And in this storyline, the forces of the underworld are an army. They are consolidated, they are organized. It is a single storyline that is driving all of the issues that, as far as I can gather. And this is pacing itself across the various episodes of the major civilizations. So there could be several centuries between issues, but it is basically picking up where the last story left off. The conflicts that have been driving the forces of the upper world, the heroes, the forces of light versus the gods and the demons of darkness that dwell below, who are imprisoned and are trying to gain their access to this world. They are trying to conquer this reality by subduing and seducing and turning people against one another. So through various kind of surreptitious techniques, they kind of sneak their way into the politics of the ancient civilizations. They try to seduce heroes. They try to make societies war against one another so that they begin to call on these powerful forces below in order to gain advantage. But whoever controls and dominates the Peruvian landscape will be the ones who will inadvertently bring the forces of the underworld to the earth to conquer the world and to undo the creative forces and the powers of light from the forces on high. So what I'd like to do is show a few choice illustrations that really exemplify the things that I liked the most about this series. This was just a spectacular feat, and I am going to look for the other issues as soon as I can. But for now, I wanted to talk about some things that really got my attention. If you look at, here's page 17, and at the top there is an image of a mountain that is actually from the Peruvian geography. And toward the bottom, there are ample footnotes that describe some of the details of the location, the cultures, and even some vocabulary terms from the Quechua language. So it has many different supplements that don't detract from the story, but provide additional information to learn more about the indigenous peoples and their language, their cultures, their archaeology, and just a rich trove of content that reflects the folklore, the mythology of the Inca, the Nazca, the Amazonian, and many of the other native societies that are explored and represented in the series. I also wanted to look at the last page here, because here you can see that there is a coding, a borrowing from contemporary ethnographic symbolism that is that explains the way the designs and the meanings behind the patterns and the colors that are then expressed through the artwork in this series. And then on the final page, there is a list of the colonial sources that were referenced. So I really admire the research that went behind the production of this series. This was just an extraordinary feat. And just to see this in a comic book format, this is very much what I'd like to do in some of my own writing, researching the myths and cultures and languages to create a compelling and fascinating and engaging storyline that cuts across centuries of the histories of these native societies across Peru. One other example that I wanted to highlight here, this is from the Huarochirí Carwincho, who was a major character in the Huarochirí myth. And on page 22, I wanted to, show the exquisite detail brought into the portrayal of the sun god Inti. and in the costume, in the accoutrements, in the ornamentation. And this is just a wonderful example of the quality of the artwork that was brought into here. And because Inti was such an important protagonist in the story, and also because I had seen him so extensively throughout throughout my travels in Cusco, I thought that this would be a really nice transition into today's mask. But before I do so, I want to thank all of you who have followed me over these past 3 months, from roughly March to June of 2020, as I developed this 10-part series. And now I come to a close with today's mask, and I will look forward to seeing you again when I begin my new playlist and return to Mexico for some of the new topics that I will be exploring in this Eye of the Serpent series. So now, today's mask.